Hundreds of cops are fleeing the state of California and coming to the great state of Texas. And Greg Abbott says, "Welcome to Texas. We support our law enforcement officers and demand law and order. But never forget the leftist policies that you fled and always vote the right way." Let's check this out from the Daily Mail. It says hundreds of cops fleeing California to Texas, blaming Golden State's soft on crime policies that made their jobs feel pointless and put their lives at risk. This is a great article. We're going to go through this and talk about it a bit. It says hundreds of cops are fleeing, California cops are fleeing to Texas to escape soft on crime policies they say have made their jobs pointless. Rank and file officers up to department chiefs have hit out state legislators claiming a succession of law enforcement policies have made their work impossible. Overworked and undersupported, they have instead taken up jobs in Texas and other states that are seen as tough on crime. Yes, Texas, great place to be if you want to be in a place that has a governor and state legislators that respect law and order. Florida's another one as well. Evan Leona, 38, who ditched his job as a detective at a multi-agency gang unit in Fresno, California, to work for Denton Police in Texas in 2022, said he had met more than 100 officers in the Dallas-Fort Worth area who had fled California. That's fantastic news, and I'll get to that in a second. There are 5 officers who have come from various agencies in California on my shift alone in Denton. The justice system just works a lot better here. As you can see, this is an officer and for Santa Monica College. He's a captain, and he moved to Hewitt, Texas. It says it's become increasingly difficult to retain and recruit officers in California due to lack of support in the state. There's another officer, Gina Miller, a former deputy at San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, says California's legal system had left officers feeling like whatever they did was pointless. And now she's at Louisville. And here's her home right here. And you can tell she's a Texas-loving woman, America-loving woman. As you can see this flag. Usually when I see flags in front of people's homes, Texas flags, American flags, that's a sign of patriotism, in my opinion. And they're not going to vote Republican. They're not going to vote Democrat. That's just my observation, my opinion as well. Leona said the majority of those who leave headed to Texas with others finding work in states such as Montana and Arizona. It comes as the Golden State is hemorrhaging thousands of police every year, with numbers down by more than 5,000 since 2019. There are now fears that high-crime California cities are suffering a brain drawn in law enforcement, leaving the public unprotected as criminals run riot. That's scary. Ray Buttonfield, a former Santa Monica police captain who retired to Hewitt, Texas, admitted it had become increasingly difficult to retain or recruit officers due to lack of support from the state, as we said before. When you're getting beaten up constantly, your cost of living is getting worse, and you're dealing with all the political stuff, it's overwhelming. Many law enforcement officers blame controversial legislation Proposition 47 and 57 for turning prisons into revolving doors and putting their lives at risk. Liberal politicians have staunchly defended their policies, arguing they have been misinterpreted and blamed unfairly for rising crime. They say the aim of reforms was to alleviate pressure on the state's overcrowded prisons and refocus policing efforts on more serious crimes. Regardless, the efforts appear deeply unpopular among many who patrol the streets. Yes, these policies are very unpopular. We see a lot of things like $950 or less being stolen, the penalties for that are being lowered, things like that will make people very uncomfortable and make these things very controversial. They don't work. People want to see people punished for the crimes they commit, punished appropriately, I should say. The 37-year-old moved to Texas. Gina Miller, a former deputy at San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, told DailyMail.com that California's legal system had left officers feeling like whatever they did was pointless. The 37-year-old, as I said, moved to Texas in 2021 and now works for Louisville, the police department, around 25 miles north of Dallas. She said her work now had a purpose again, adding, "If I take someone to jail, they're actually going to stay in jail until they see a judge. It is how it should be." And here's the drop in police officers in California from 2019. You see about 121,000 down to 116,000. You don't want to see officers fleeing your state. And it's things like this. Videos right here, smash and grabs, people snatching up phones and smashing the jewelry store cases. We don't really see. I'm not saying it doesn't happen in other places like Florida and Texas, but you don't really turn on the news and see it happening in places like this because they know there will be consequences. People are actually going to get in trouble. They're going to have to face the price for the games that they play, the stupid games that they play. You see things like this on the internet all the time. And look, when we had the 2020 riots, you didn't really see too much of that in Texas or Florida. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but it was to a lesser extent than places like Minnesota, California, New York, Illinois. Governor Abbott wasn't having it. Ron DeSantis wasn't having it. I believe Abbott deployed about 1,500 DPS agents throughout the state to get a hold of things, to get things from getting out of control, I should say. Officer Miller said some of her former California colleagues had quit to take up desk jobs tackling welfare fraud because they no longer felt safe patrolling the streets. See, people don't even feel safe on the streets. They want to take desk jobs and be behind a door. In particular, she hit out at Proposition 57, which she claims has left violent offenders onto the streets. Put forward by then Governor Jerry Brown and passed by voters in 2016, the law was designed to reduce prison overcrowding by offering the possibility of early parole for nonviolent offenders. But critics highlighted a loophole that meant offenses such as domestic violence and assault with a deadly weapon were not included under a list of violent offenses. It came under the spotlight after it was revealed that Smiley Martin, a suspect in a 2022 mass shooting in Sacramento that left 6 dead, was released early from a 10-year sentence for domestic violence and assault under provisions set out in Proposition 57. Miller claims the law has also put officers' lives at risk by opening the door for violent criminals. The officer whose last assignment during her 11-year stint at San Bernardino was in relatively safe and affluent city of Rancho Cucamonga, said 4 of her colleagues at Sheriff's Department were shot during their final 6 months. Unbelievable. That's a lot. That's a lot. Her final 6 months that 4 officers were shot, it's crazy. One of them, Sergeant Dominic Vesa, if I said that correctly, 43, was killed after he was shot pursuing a motorcycle without license plate in 2021. There is no indication that the suspect, Bilal Winston Shabazz, had been released early under Proposition 57. But Miller said such policies had created a general awareness within the state, leaving officers and the public feeling unsafe. She recalled a time she took a man to jail for putting a loaded gun to his wife's head, only for him to be released the same day. I got into this job to try to help people make a difference. And as she said, it was heartbreaking to be telling this victim, I know your husband just tried to kill you, but he's already out of jail, so just call us if he comes back. That is crazy. To see their faces, it wears you down. You're like, this is stupid because you can't do anything for anybody. And that's how it is in New York City with what's the Humpty Dumpty's name up there, Alvin Bragg. With all these soft on crime policies, cops up there are saying it's like a revolving door. You arrest them, and then they just get right back out. You're really not making any progress. Doesn't matter how many arrests you make, they're just going to get right back out and commit more crimes. Here's a sergeant shot dead in California, in San Bernardino. It's tragic to see situations like that. And here's Mr. Smiley Martin, the man suspected in a 2022 mass shooting who was let out of prison early. Look, if I see this guy walking towards me at night, yeah, no good. Officer Leona, 38, who spent 5 years in Tulare County before serving in Fresno County Sheriff Office for a decade, said he was hospitalized following an assault by a violent criminal. He said the suspect, who was presumably high on narcotics, had been chasing school children before running into a stranger's garden. What the heck? What kind of crazy nonsense is this? A standoff with police ensued. At one point, he hit me over the head with a board. I hit him with my baton. He picked me up and threw me through a sliding glass window into the kitchen of his lady's house. I was bleeding all over the place. He was bleeding. We were rolling around the kitchen. It took 8 officers to finally subdue him. Broke my hand. I got this sutures in my face. Goodness gracious. Another officer broke his wrist, and a third officer had to get sutures. What is that? Sutures, I don't know what that is, or stitches within it. He was only in custody for a couple of months and then got released. Miller also claimed Proposition 47 had turned California's prison into revolving doors. That's what I'm talking about, the revolving door in these places. The measure passed by voters in 2014 reclassified nonviolent offenses as misdemeanors, including shoplifting, where the value of stolen property does not exceed $950. It has been blamed by some, including Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco and California retail head Rachel McKillen, for a rise in thefts after scores of stores in the state suffered brazen heists. Whether California's legal reforms are directly to blame for such incidents remain the subject of fierce debate. And yes, there are some that will say that it's not true, and then there are others that say, well, there is a correlation between crime going up and people feeling more brazen to do certain things because of these policies, because they feel like there's not going to be harsh consequences for this. But there is little doubt that the overwhelming workload facing officers in high crime areas are pushing many out. Police chiefs across the state have sounded the alarm about their depleted ranks. This week, Merced County Sheriff Vern Warnke again warned the lack of deputies in his department, having previously warned the dire staffing crisis was getting kind of scary. And that is scary. You can't find people to fill these positions. Who's going to protect the streets? That's crazy. Sacramento Chief of Police Kathy Lester said in June that her department was woefully understaffed, while Los Angeles County Sheriff Department, the region's largest law enforcement agency, is suffering from a 20% shortfall of deputies. In 2022, more than 230 San Diego police officers left the department, the highest separation rate in more than a decade. The department lost patrol officers, detectives, seasoned homicide inspectors, collision reconstruction experts, SWAT officers, canine handlers, training officers, and police helicopter pilots. That is a lot of personnel to lose right there. You're losing over 200 officers, and many of them doing from all kinds of areas of the department. SWAT, canine, pilots, helicopter pilots. It's ridiculous. 2/3 of those losses were resignations, not retirements. Nearly half of those resignations were by officers who went to other law enforcement agencies. The Public Safety Institute of California found that the ratio of patrol officers to residents in the state is at its lowest point since 1991, the furthest back the data goes. Leona doesn't see the tide being stemmed anytime soon. They would have to completely change legislation in California, he said, but that's not going to happen. Wow. Yeah, this is not good. For now, the grass still appears to be greener on the other side. Leona now lives in Fort Worth with his wife, who is expecting their first child in August. There's substantially less crime here, fewer gangs, he said. I had my house broken into in Fresno. I was nervous for my wife to go to the store. I just don't have those fears anymore. Yeah, I mean, Fort Worth is not far from where I live. I live in Dallas, Fort Worth, but Fort Worth is a relatively safe city. I'm not saying it doesn't have crime, it doesn't have problems, but because it does, be compared to places like Los Angeles or Chicago, I will feel much more safe in Fort Worth as I go to Fort Worth every month or so. And I don't really feel unsafe there. And the police department is fantastic. They have a great mayor who's very, I'm not saying she's the greatest mayor on planet in the country, because, she has her flaws like anybody else, but she is very pro law enforcement. See, Miller, who now lives in Corinth, said she took a pay cut to move to Texas, but she is still financially better off as her take-home pay is the same because there is no state income tax in the Lone Star State, and her money goes further. Let's see. The one Buttonfield, 61, who was awarded the Medal of Valor by Barack Obama in 2016 for his role in subduing an active shooter in Santa Monica in 2013, he has officially managed to live out the move that he had been planning years before he retired in June 2018. In November of that year, he waved goodbye to his $1,800 a month two-bedroom apartment in Fountain Valley to build a home in Texas. He and his wife sold that and now have bought a $360,000 three-bedroom home and a garage in Hewitt, halfway between Austin and Dallas. Not all former West Coast cops have been welcomed with open arms in their red state retirement communities, however. A recent LA Times article exposed the backlash from locals in Eagle, a small town in Idaho, who said hundreds of ex-California law enforcement officers were bringing liberal baggage to their community, but Bonnenfield has found no such disdain down south. They understood that my politics was a lot like theirs. There's a saying here in Texas, I wasn't born here, but I got here as soon as I could. And see, there's, now like it says, in Idaho there was a problem. They were bringing the liberal baggage to the community. In the South, here in Texas, we're not seeing that so much. You see what these officers have said. They feel they can get their jobs done. They left because they didn't feel like they could perform their jobs properly. They were afraid for their lives. And they know who is going to take care of them, which is the people at the top in their cities and the governor who actually respects law enforcement. So yeah, while you are going to have officers that go to other places and they may bring their liberal BS. They're going to bring their liberal BS, but that's not really the case here in Texas. It sucked for the places that they left, that they're losing their law enforcement officers, their police officers in these towns of being unmanned. They're not as manned the way they should, but the way they should be. But it's good for us. It's good for us, and it comes down to the local politics. And what is somebody supposed to do if their hands are tied? You arrest somebody, but then they get out the next day. It's not how it's supposed to work. So when they come to Texas, we welcome them with open arms. And that's why Governor Abbott says, never forget the leftist policies that you fled and always vote the right way. I think a good amount of law enforcement officers here in Texas are more conservative. I think actually the majority of them probably are, because their job is law and order. Their job is to keep peace in the streets. That's why they're called peace officers. And I think that if you have someone like Governor Abbott versus Jumpin' Jack Flat Beto, they're going to vote for Governor Abbott. If you look at somebody like Donald Trump, who is super pro law enforcement, backs the police more than almost as much as anybody I've ever seen, they're going to go with a guy like Trump over Biden any day. They see what's going on across the country in these liberal cities. Chicago, New York, LA, the brazen crime happening in broad daylight. They don't want to deal with that. They want to come to a place like Texas where they are respected, where we love our law enforcement. Now, if you do the right thing, if you're a good person, you do your job properly, you get respect from us. I love my law enforcement here where I live, my local, my city where I live in. They are great guys and women. The mayor is very pro law enforcement. He hires the best of the best. We had somebody move here a lady move here from Memphis, and she is fantastic. Black lady, man, she is tough, tall. She actually chased down a guy in a parking lot and tackled him. And you see her, she looks intimidating as heck, but she's a nice lady, super nice lady. But we hire the best here where I live, and I like that. So it comes down to your local politics. Yeah, but I'm going to leave that right there. I just wanted to share that with you, that a lot of hundreds of police officers are coming from California, and a lot of them are conservative. So be happy in that right there. But all right, guys, thanks for listening. Like and subscribe. See you next time. Thank you. Take care.